Hi, and welcome to the Online Forest Summit, BC Forest, the People's Convergence. I'm Jennifer Houghton, and I'm one of the co-organizers of the summit, and I'm speaking to you here today from my home in Grand Forks, which is on the traditional territory of the Syilx, the Sinixt, and the Ktunaxa people. And today I'm here with Erik Piikila. Welcome, Erik.
Howdy.
And Kathy Code. Welcome, Kathy.
Hello.
And Erik and Kathy are with the Ecoforestry Institute Society, owners and trustees of Wildwood Ecoforest. So I'm going to turn it over to them. They've got a great presentation today all about the Eco Society, or the Ecoforestry Institute rather, and the Wildwood Ecoforest. All right, over to you guys.
Thank you, Jennifer. I really appreciate the invitation to be here and to present at the Forest Summit. I would also like to acknowledge that Wildwood Ecoforest is on the lands of the Shumanis and Sunamith First Nations, and we're very grateful for their partnerships. As Jennifer said, I'm Kathy Code. I'm the Vice Chair and Communications Director with the Ecoforestry Institute Society. I've been with the Society now since November 2014, and it's been quite the journey, and I'm really proud to have been part of this whole thing.
So my name's Erik Piikila, and I'm also on the board of Wildwood Ecoforestry. I'm on the Education Committee, and I'm also on the Forestry Committee and on the main board. And I guess I'm a forest and watershed ecologist, and I got a bit of a presentation here about maybe how we could be doing forestry differently in BC and using ecoforestry, ecosystem-based management, and how we're doing it at Wildwood, and then some of a bit of the history of Merv Wilkinson, who started Wildwood, and how have we gotten to today. So I'll just start that up. Okay, so there's a lovely forest somewhere in the tropics, I'm sure, but equally these concepts are very similar across the world about what are we worrying about forested ecosystems and what they provide for us at the very least, such as clean water, clean air, store carbon, and provide habitat, and maybe even some wood to create some jobs and drive economies as well. So Wildwood, an ecoforestry way to do 21st century forestry. So Wildwood was started by a guy named Merv Wilkinson back in 1938, and he was originally going to log Wildwood and do some farming, but he went to UBC and met a Swedish-Danish professor who brought a German forestry course in on selection logging from Germany and translated it into English and taught Merv how to do selection forestry. And that was in 1938 to 1943, and then Merv's first harvest was in 1945 using the selection forestry system. So Merv's system was set up on only harvesting a small percentage of the growth, the interest in his forest bank account. He didn't harvest all of the forest or all that growth in the interest, and he didn't harvest all of the forest, the principal. So he was only just tapping into a small amount of the growth on his forest, and he didn't destroy any future growth, and he didn't borrow into the future. And the forest was always growing at full capacity and also in its connectedness. So all of the ecosystem processes were working, and all of the ecological goods and services that forests provide were happening all the time. So as scientific knowledge and ecological consciousness began to rise in the 1960s and 70s, Merv also moved with the times. And as that ecological momentum started to build a lot of steam in the 1980s and 1990s, Merv was at the front leading the charge on changes. So the 1990s were a big tumultuous decade for forests and ecosystems, and Merv and his wife were arrested in 1993 at the Clackowet Sound protests and the War of Our Woods. So Merv managed Wildwood using a lifetime of local knowledge combined with intuitive system and timber cruise data that he used as the foundation for selection forestry. In the 1980s and 1990s, Merv and Wildwood moved towards ecoforestry and building a lot of on research that was happening in British Columbia and the US Pacific Northwest. So in and about that time, too, in the 90s, the Ecoforestry Institute Society was formed, and it was brought on board to help run and manage Wildwood. So from in the late 90s and early 2000s, then Wildwood was essentially donated and sold to the Land Conservancy to manage in perpetuity for the people of BC, and EIS, then the Ecoforestry Institute Society, was helping manage Wildwood for MERV and for the Land Conservancy, the TLC. So now in 2006, since 2016, EIS then has owned and managed Wildwood for the benefit of the people of BC in perpetuity. That's what it says in our trust document, that we're looking after this forest, MERV's forest, for the people of BC in perpetuity. So we're also focused on demonstrating ecoforestry, doing education, protecting the ecosystem, and make sure there's public access and public education. We've moved our management a little bit to doing some data collection, and we want to make sure that we're using the best science as well as learning from the past. What did MERV do out there that can tell us how we should be managing it going forward? And Wildwood is a living laboratory. So a lot of our science is coming from BC and the US Pacific Northwest, and we've built up now 50 years of forest and ecological science. And we're also going to be collecting data from the past and also definitely the present. And on the left-hand side, there's sort of a decision tree of what we would talk about in our forestry committee when we go out in the woods and try and decide what's going to happen out in there. In some cases, we're going to have danger trees, places where people are crossing paths with that. But for the most part, we're talking about ecosystem needs, coarse woody debris, habitat creation, and through thinnings, how can we make sure that the forests and the ecosystems are maintained? And we want to definitely focus on maintaining ecosystem connectivity, functioning, and making sure that these forests are able to do and create a lot of ecological goods and services, at the very least, clean air, clean water, and store carbon and provide habitat. So first thing is danger trees. So some of the things that we have to focus on is, are there on the visitor pathways, are there going to be dead and dying trees that are going to be falling down and potentially crossing paths or injuring visitors? We also have a few hydro lines on the site. We have some buildings, we have some roads and fire access, and potentially trees could fall into other neighbors' property. So that's some of the things that we start as our sort of a starting point. And if that danger tree process doesn't exist, then we start with ecosystem needs, because that's where really the bread and butter of Wildwood is looking about the old trees, making sure that there's intact forest, that we're maintaining forest cover. We're making sure that the mother trees are doing and still able to do their job as photosynthetic powerhouses. We've got carbon storage going on. We've got moss and lichen and fungi, which in a lot of cases after forest fires or after logging may take hundreds of years to come back. And we also want to make sure that the above and below ground processes are doing everything that they need to do to make sure that we have a wide variety of biodiversity and those ecological goods and services from the Wildwood forest and other forests, that we can keep on producing them and they are a benefit to us. And in a lot of cases, if we're making sure that the forests can do their job, such as storing water, slowing down water, filtering water, we can actually be saving money in our municipalities by not having to spend millions and billions of dollars on water filtration systems or seawalls or raising weirs, because we're letting those forested ecosystems do their job. So there's actually a cost-saving benefit, an economic benefit to protecting and restoring these forested ecosystems. So something else we're also focused on too is coarse woody debris, large, huge logs on the ground. So after 100 years, this big log will actually be a nutrient inputter into the soil. And also it sponges up water, it slows down water. It's an actual water dam, if you want to think about it there, and providing habitat for salamanders and slugs and all kinds of animals that need those moist conditions. And over time then, that log will decay and then become the next soil as well. So we're also making sure that we're looking after the coarse woody debris that's across Wildwood, and is something that we need to do across BC. So we also want to look about habitat creations. We want to make sure that we're maintaining, enhancing, and if we don't have it, then if we can recruit new pieces of these important biological legacies, or sometimes we might even manually create them. But we want to make sure from a habitat creation point of view is that there's trees of various heights and ages, various stages of decay. We want large live trees, large dead trees, and downed logs. We want patches of trees, and we want to create those moist, cool, shady interior forest habitat conditions. So that is something that could be done with ecological forest management and ecosystem-based management and ecoforestry, is making sure that there is the right habitat for wolves, for bears, for elk, for moose, for mountain caribou, that making sure that if any harvesting is occurring, that we're making sure that we're doing things properly so that this habitat is maintained, enhanced, or recruited, or then restored in some fashion as well. And the last section, or not the last section, the next section is thinning. So in a lot of cases, we are probably going to have to move away from clear cutting in a big way, but what we could be doing is across BC is thinning forests for multiple objectives, like fire smarting, because we see now with huge forest fires in Washington, Oregon, and California that we need to be thinning these forests, and we need to be having multiple objectives for the thinning. So if we can fire smart a forest by doing the thinning, we're also doing some forest restoration. That same thinning may help us advance that forest along the old growth development curve, maybe create some gaps, create some habitat. And even in the end, while we're doing this thinning, we'll actually be creating some timber or wood supply that can be then turned into forest products. So if we're working with multiple objectives in our thinning operations, we can actually move the forests in a different direction and help them be restored to doing the job that they're supposed to do. And we'll also make some wood and help drive the economy a little bit as well too from thinning operations. So I think there's a huge job potential across BC to start thinning our forests like we used to do in the 1980s and 1990s. Juvenile spacing and commercial thinning are two things that we've kind of run away from in BC. So in our harvesting operations, we need to make sure that if we're doing any harvesting that we have ecosystem needs at the top of our mind. And there's different kind of objectives out there, but we want to make sure that we're thinking about what do these ecosystems need to do the job to help us, to help society, to help the planet, look after the planet, stop climate change. Like these forests, we have some of the best tree growing ground in the world in BC, and these forests are also some of the best carbon sequestrators in the world as well, and we have to let them do that job. It will actually help us fight climate change and global warming. And in a lot of cases too, we want to make sure that we have young forests, because forests 100 years ago, over the past 10,000 years, had forests in different kinds of conditions and ages, and windstorms and forest fires had gone through. So we want to make sure that all those habitat possibilities are out there. And by doing the harvesting that we've pushed all the remaining species into smaller and smaller pieces of the old growth that's left. We're getting places where human habitation is mixing in with the forest and the wildland-urban interface and the towns and the cities, and we're all getting jammed into smaller and smaller pieces and closer together. And that's in a lot of cases why people think that the pandemics are outgoing as well too, because we've disturbed these ecosystems so much that these viruses that used to be held in place in their ecosystems have now been released. So there's all kinds of reasons why we need to be looking and doing things forestry, doing it differently. And we have so much science out there, 50 years of ecological science that tells us what are these ecosystems, what makes them go, and what is it that we should be, how we should be protecting them. And if we're going to do any harvesting, how to be doing it with a light impact on the forests and the land, and using that ecological science that we don't destroy and we don't wreck these ecosystems. So the last thing then is that we also too at Wildwood are going to be, and Merv used to do this a lot as well too, is making sure that there's some neat wood possibilities at Wildwood and connect that wood possibilities with the local crafters and build that local market and drive the local economy by taking some of the specialty and older wood that maybe only Wildwood has to offer and make it accessible. Because right now people can't go ask for, I would like some really old growth cedar. We as citizens of BC can't go ask for for wood from our forests. So places like Wildwood and other small forests like this could be meeting some of that need and making some super value-added wood products out of this unique older forest possibilities. And we have lots of Vancouver Island and Gulf Island woodcrafters who are close at hand that I bet you would like to get some older wood and make, you know, paddles out of it, make canoes, make all kinds of neat stuff, and guitars, and turn it into a value-added kind of stuff. So there's some really neat opportunities here, and Wildwood is a model for, has got 80 years of that model, and we've now, using the best science and management, we're going to move it into the 21st century, but always with the ecosystem needs are top in mind in our system. So there's some references there. There's the pictures of Merv. This is a really neat article that the Ministry of Forests wrote back in the 1990s, and you can see the link on it there. And if you want to go see some of the videos where I chat about a lot of these different things, there's some links there for my YouTube channel. And here's the photos. Most of these photos in the presentation are mine, and there's Jerry Franklin on the left there, and my buddy Marshall Murray, who Marshall turned 90 this year, and he's a yellow cedar enthusiast and researcher. And of course, Jerry Franklin's sort of the grandfather and father of ecoforestry, and that's the two of them back in 2012 when we were celebrating 60 years of Jerry Franklin and ecosystems and forestry and ecoforestry. So thank you to the Boundary Forest Watershed Stewardship Society, Jennifer Houghton, Taryn Scalbania, my co-presenter here, Kathy Toad, and my wife, my mother and family, Merv Wilkinson, Jerry Franklin, Nancy Turner, and Marshall and Margie Murray. And if you have any questions, you can pause the video. There's my email, and send us questions, and we will see if we can answer them for you about how we could be doing forestry differently in BC. And that's it. Thank you. Over to Kathy.
So on to my presentation now. I'll just share the screen. So I'm pleased to present to you today my portion of this presentation, Ecoforestry, Living Within Ecological Parameters. And so we'll go through a little bit about the conventional forestry model. We'll talk about forest benefits. We'll look at the EIS Ecoforestry framework, Wildwood's next chapter, and then what can you do then to support different ways of forestry in the province of BC. Conventional forestry in BC, 95% of the forests are on Crown land. It's a public resource that's been extracted over many decades and centuries. On the south coast of Vancouver Island, less than 1% is old growth, and the preferred corporate and government model is one of maximum profits at the least costs. So that's why we have clear-cutting systems and that essentially destroy the water systems, our air purification systems, wildlife habitat, biodiversity, which means that our old growth forests, our natural forests, are replaced with plantation forests, which is basically the planting of commercially viable trees that are logged long before they get to old growth status. So the rationale for conventional forestry then are twofold. One is the profits, obviously the profits that go to the logging companies, and for government revenue that helps pay for our social, educational, and health programs throughout the province. There are jobs that are created throughout BC that are critical for our rural communities, jobs such as foresters, mill workers, truckers, all that pay really good living wage income for people who log in BC. Okay, so all of that brings us then to the status of conventional forestry today. That has resulted in boom and bust cycles for many of BC's rural communities, a decline in jobs due to the amount of raw log exports and all the technological advances that have been made in operating mills. Require less humans to run the operations, and of course declining profits over time. We've also learned through the research conducted by Dave Broadland from Focus magazine, who looked at the provincial accounts and discovered that forestry doesn't pay the bills, folks. And in fact, taxpayers are subsidizing the forest industry to the tune of $1 million a day. We've also suffered a loss of our intact ecosystems, wildlife habitats, biodiversity, great loss of research opportunities. Old growth forest has resulted in very few studies. And the problem is that we don't know what we don't know. And we need an opportunity to go and have a look and see exactly how an old growth forest works and all of the creatures that inhabit it. There's also a loss of forest services. And I'll talk now to what some of those forest services are. You have to remember that all of these services are free. We don't pay for any of these services, but it is a starting point for our understanding of forests and all ecological systems. Forests are the lungs of the planet. They produce purified air, production of oxygen, which is critical to us. I think most of us would prefer to breathe than not. Forests also purify our water and provide really complex hydrological systems. There is no more water in the world. The water in the world is what we have. It's the same water that cycles through. It's what they call the tears of the dinosaur concept. So when we poison water and it no longer is available to us, there's less water to cycle through the whole process. Wildlife habitat and biodiversity, from fungi to large fur-bearing animals, it's all a complex system of how these things work together in the web of life. And when you disrupt one animal life, then you disrupt everything and you don't know what you're disrupting. Forests provide us edible and medicinal plants. Indigenous peoples know a great deal about this and we have much to learn from them. Forests offer us carbon storage, sequestration, timber and building materials, and gifts just beyond value. Just being and breathing in the forest and the whole spirituality of the forest really brings us comfort and connection to nature. In all, it's a self-contained and regenerating system that cycles from birth to death. And if we allow it to do its work, we'll provide those wonderful services for us forever. So let's talk then about our Ecoforestry Institute Society of Forestry Framework and how we operate Wildwood. You can see there on the right, there is Merv teaching ecoforestry to a group of people who often came on the land to learn more about how he was operating on Wildwood and what he was doing. So when I look at the framework that we've developed in the time that we've been operating Wildwood, I'm come to realize that we really have three reference points then. We have Merv's legacy, and among his many contributions were the fact that he knew the forest. He would walk the forest, the trees were his friends, he knew where each and every one of them was. He was a very intuitive forest, and that's how he did a lot of his timber harvesting, was he knew his forest so well that he knew the exact places that the forest needed some timber cut so that the rest of the forest could thrive. He also knew that you never stop learning. He was a great observer of wildlife and appreciated input from people who came to visit on the land, and he did invite the world to come. He would have delegations from all over the world, and they would make suggestions to him, like he needed to leave more coarse woody debris on the forest floor, and once he realized that, then he would accept those practices and implement them. So he was really great at that sort of thing. Indigenous practices are also influencing the way that we operate Wildwood. There's a spiritual connection that Indigenous peoples have with the forest. They have great respect and knowledge of the forest, and huge part of their philosophy is that you never take more than you need. I think that's a really valuable lesson for us. And of course, a key part of this is the preservation of all systems. And a more contemporary reference point then comes down to donut economics, which many people have heard about now. This is authored by Kate Raworth, a British economist, who has likened the whole cycle then to a donut, with the outer bounds of the donut being your ecological parameters, the inner circle or whole being bounded by your social and cultural needs, and then your operational needs are everything that works within those boundaries, so that you never exceed your ecological parameters, but you learn how to provide for your social and cultural needs within those parameters. So ecoforestry means that we cut for the benefit of the forest. We use a precautionary principle with the priorities being, as Eric has mentioned, you know, the danger, diseased and dying trees, and then considering the harvesting, then the trees that can be removed, considering factors such as light, density and species of the other trees nearby, the soil, the age of the tree, new growth. It all comes down to a philosophy that we are a part of nature, not apart from it. So then when we drill down a little bit deeper, let's have a look then at the Ecoforestry Institute Society and how we have managed to operate Wildwood then within those bounds. First of all, we're a nonprofit registered charitable society, and we became owners and trustees of Wildwood in November 2016, so a little over 3.5 years ago. So we were just a small society, and you know, other than Wildwood, we didn't have much in the way of assets. We had the homestead, which existed already on the property, but we did have a hardworking and hands-on board and a very supportive community who came through for us in terms of donations and volunteer work and a really good spirit within the area. When we won the right to acquire Wildwood in November 2016, it meant that we acquired a debt of $450,000 in terms of the mortgage we were obliged to obtain. We thank Van City for having enough faith and trust in us to provide us that mortgage. We also put forward $117,000 in directors' loans. These were personal loans made by 3 directors to serve as operating expenses then for the society. When we first came to this whole process, we really were just a small society. We did a little bit of education, but we really had nothing in the way of any significant funds. So those are issues that we needed to address if we were going to be responsible owners and trustees of Wildwood. So our primary mandates at Wildwood are ecoforestry and education. And at the same time, to support the property, we can't just cut down the trees to satisfy our debts. We still have to work within those ecological parameters. So we looked at building our financial strategy, and our #1 priority then became the restoration of the homestead. It's the 2,500 square foot log cabin that Merv and his second wife, Grace, built on the property. It was in dire need of repair and restoration, shall we say, and we had to take the whole building back to the logs, the raw log walls, and completely restore the inside of it. We were fortunate enough to get grants from a couple of sources totaling $215,000. The rest was supplied by a lot of community donations and a lot of ingenuity on our part, and of course the use of our own timber harvest, which came in very handy for building the bed platforms, for building decks, and for building other things at the homestead. And what we did in the process of that $250,000 project then was that we lifted the entire local economy. We used local suppliers as much as we could. We employed local tradespeople, the electricians, the floor layers, the drywallers, the plasters, as many local tradespeople as we could find. And they were wonderful to us, you know, often reducing their hourly rate and giving us materials for free because they really believed in the project. We've also been building our partnerships with First Nations, as I mentioned, the Shumanis and the Snuneymuxw. We've been able to welcome them to the property and take part in some ceremonies with them, and it's been very deeply moving and an important part of our community building. We've worked with Creatively United to prepare a webinar series, much like this one. It's available online. And we've also worked with educational organizations such as School District Number 68, so that we have programs where we can bring school children in to learn about the forest and to experience the forest firsthand. So we're building our community, our volunteers, workshop attendees. Young people are really important then to build our circle. The Earth Guardians have been wonderful and have attended a workshop, a work party then to help eradicate the yellow flag iris on the property. So those are really some great connections that we're building in terms of our community. So we have to look at revenue generation then for our ongoing operations. So we, other than the timber revenues, which will come in time once we're through building what we need to do, we have established the beginnings of a really solid educational program, making it accessible and affordable for children, for families, for people who want to attend, for students, through the use of grant money as well. So that's really important that we bring people to the property so that they can learn about Wildwood. The homestead has been a great success. We finished it after a 14-month project, and it's been wonderful in terms of accommodation for eco-tourists from all over the world and for educational events as well. We've also engaged in property rentals, weddings, picnics, community requests for private events. And we've held events such as tours and teas. We even had a summer sonata that drew people in to hear a string orchestra, which was really lovely. We also received donations, EIS memberships, and eventually we hope to bring on board more timber sales and value-added wood products like the ones that Eric mentioned previously. So we're also being able to offer job creation, and current jobs that we have where we actually employ people include our education coordinator, naturalists, tour guides, homestead cleaners, which are really important, really key to us. A new one called the homestead concierge, the meet and greet person then who takes our guests then through beginning to know the property, construction workers and tradespeople. And jobs to come, those are jobs such as ecoforesters, loggers, millers, woodworkers, workshop facilitators, artisans, etc. So that we know that in time we will become an employer as well as being able to supply our own revenue generation. So this is really important because when people think of forests, they think in terms of logs and that it's only the sale, the cutting and sale of logs that are the job creators, which is not true. I think there are other ways that a forest can be viewed and other ways that forest can be used to, in an attacked way, then to provide an economy of its own. So what does this all mean? What we have then is a healthy environment becomes the primary working parameter into which the social foundation and values and connections are embedded. And into this, then that's where the economics and the economy are embedded, which means that there is no capacity then for the endless economic expansion such as in the world that we currently experience. So it becomes more of a realistic model in terms of operating in the real world. So further thoughts, and I just want to mention this photograph here. It has really a good meaning for us. This is Lindsay Wilkinson, who's the great-granddaughter of Merv Wilkinson and her now husband. Lindsay and Garrett came back to Wildwood after many years' absence in summer of 2017. And we're so enthralled with the forest and becoming reacquainted with it that they came back the next summer then for their wedding ceremony. And so this is a beautiful photo of them in the forest. So it has a special meaning for us. So in terms of Wildwood then, we're in the initial stages of owning and operating Wildwood, and it's all thanks to a very strong, diversified and united board. We have a number of foundational documents that mandate and guide our operations. For instance, the trust deed, which is a cutting edge document. It's placed on the title, on our land title, which means that the property can never ever be sold to a private individual. It must always be a charitable organization of like-minded values that will own Wildwood forever. We have our mission and values and a very detailed ecoforestry management plan, which includes extensive inventories of all the trees and the wildlife that are on the land. We offer programs and events, and in turn welcome proposals from the community and how the property is used. And we rely very heavily on a wonderful team of volunteers, eventually offering some well-paying jobs. And we have successfully developed the revenue streams and to meet our financial obligations. So our next chapter then is going to be one of building our Build Wildwood program. We have some ambitions then in terms of the directions that we will take on the land and that are within our ecological and mandated principles. For instance, an outdoor classroom is presently underway in terms of consultation and design. Eventually, we'll have a mill shed, a storage shed and workshop. An ecoforestry center of excellence where we can conduct research, especially on old growth. Caretaker's lodge, small footprint rental cabins, and eventually an art gallery and gift shop area. So in conclusion, Wildwood is a very small example of what working within ecological parameters looks like, but it's all scalable. For instance, the city of Amsterdam is now committed to adopting the donut economics model. So that's something I know that I'll be very interested in following to see how they do with that. We also have to remember that Indigenous peoples have been practicing this model for millennia, and we have much to learn from them. And in this post-COVID-19 era, we have to demand a more humane and just society, one that respects our ecological values and boundaries. And community forests are more likely to provide revenue and job security within their own regions. I just wanted to take a quick opportunity then to introduce our EIS board. I'll start from left to right. So Dr. Nancy Turner, who is a well-known and famous ethnobotanist, we're very pleased to have her on board. She and Eric head the education committee, and they've done an amazing job in terms of developing some very innovative programs. Barry Gates is one of our co-chairs, and he is one of our eco-foresters and millers. He actually owns the small portable sawmill on site and does our milling for us. Then that's me, the short one in the middle. And as I said, I'm Vice President and Communications Director, and I also assist with assisted with the restoration of the homestead and current management. Sharon Chow is our much valued treasurer and financial guru. We rely on her for guiding us through all the financial pitfalls. Then Eric, who is part of the ecoforestry team. We welcome his very varied and diverse expertise. Peter Youngworth is one of our co-chairs, and he is a registered professional forester and is our logger and harvester. And then Cheryl Bancroft then is a director and manages the homestead on an almost daily basis. So we're very grateful to her and her contributions, especially in terms of architecture and design. So as you can see, a very diversified and hardworking board. We're very much a hands-on board. We communicate on a regular, almost daily basis. And I think that's been one of our strengths is our unity and our communication skills. So what can you do then in terms of contributing to more sustainable forestry, such as ecoforestry? I think the first part where people need to start is to educate yourself and to live with purpose. You know, forestry is such an important industry in BC. I think we need to consider more improved and new frameworks and how to live in harmony with our forests and to learn their purpose and how we can live better with them. We need to spend our consumer dollars more ethically and locally. That's really important to have those local dollars that's circulating within the economy. A key element is voting. You need to know who your local candidates are and what they stand for. That's really critical. And then, you know, once they're elected, ensure that they're accountable for what they said that they were going to do. And of course, in terms of the EIS and Wildwood, we always value donations, volunteer time and expertise, and participations in our Wildwood programs in our community. So we encourage you to come and visit Wildwood, and of course, bring your kids. It's a fabulous place for kids to come and learn about the forest. And last but not least is our Save the 6 Acres campaign. This is an adjoining parcel of land that used to belong to Wildwood, and it's prime old growth forest. And we've got a campaign on now to purchase that property. We've been given first rights to purchase, and we really would like to save it because it is really a wonderful piece of land. So in terms of contact information, you can either email us at admin@ecoforestry.ca or visit our website. And the link is there, or you can just Google that. So we appreciate being given this opportunity to present, and we look forward to hearing from people. Thank you.
A couple of points that I'll make is that the Save the 6 forest is a super patch of old growth forest that's like Cathedral Grove. And we'd like to bring it back to Wildwood, and it's like what the most of the east side of Vancouver Island used to be like. And it'd be really important to return it to Wildwood for that it's there in perpetuity, that people can come and visit it. The other point is that Wildwood, because we're in the ENN land belt, this private land that's being run by Island Timberlands and Timber West, in their logging operations, they can take all their logs and do raw log exporting and send them to Asia and don't put that money into the local economy. Well, Wildwood, because we're in that same ENN land belt, with our title on Wildwood, we also have permission to do raw log exporting. But we're not going to do that. So we made a conscious effort not to do that, even though we could equally send our logs out onto the open market and get them overseas and make some bigger dollars with them. But we want to drive the local economy and use that wood at Wildwood and get it to the local craftspeople. So those are kind of 2 points that I wanted to bring up, that to sort of just close on. And that these ecosystems, if we let them do their jobs, they will help us fight climate change and create jobs and create economic possibilities like there's no tomorrow, instead of the quick 25% grab of value from these forests, instead of getting 100% or 500% or 1,000% and more jobs per cubic meter. So this is in our hands as citizens and owners of the forests of BC to maximize the value that's coming out of every cubic meter that we're pulling out of the woods. And if we maximize that value, maybe we could actually log less and look after the watersheds and ecosystems. And, you know, we have it within us to do this and to do how we manage our forests differently. And we just need to get that a social will, and then get the political will to match up with that. So I'd like to close with that.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And this is a really good example of how people in your own community have gotten together, and instead of going for the quick cash grab, let's cut down some logs and export them and quick cash grab. You guys are considering the local community, and you're considering the long term. And those are things that people will be inspired by. One of the questions that we're asking people who are guests in this summit is, can you think of an example of people who are doing it? Who's already picked up the baton and is making it happen? And Wildwood Forest, everything that you just presented, is one of those examples. One of the things I wanted to ask the two of you before we go is, it's about how, this is an example of something that's happening on private land, and there are probably quite a few chunks of private land around British Columbia where this sort of thing could be done. But it happened because of, for starters, the vision of one man. It was one man who started this and made it happen. But then what enabled it to continue was a group of people, your board members, and very committed, dedicated people who've been willing to work hard. And so I'm curious about how the board came together. Were these people who were already knew Merv? Were they already involved? Was it friends of friends sort of thing? How did the board of Wildwood evolve? How did it start and then evolve?
It started as I think an academic foundation by Nancy Turner up at UVic and some of her colleagues, Dr. Duncan Taylor and Dr. Ellen Drankson, and Sharon Chow. She was formerly of the Sierra Club. So we have, a couple of those foundational members still within the group. And then I think Peter and Barry have been there long term since the late 1990s, I believe, right, Eric? Eric is one of our newer members.
Yeah, 2015.
Yeah, 2015, as is Cheryl. So Cheryl's a neighbor, thank goodness. So she practically lives at Wildwood, actually. So we've just had this wonderful community, and I came through a friend. I used to be friends with Roger Burgess, who was previously an EIS chair, and we used to go up there and visit. So, and then he asked me to do some communications, and next thing you know, you're right in there doing a whole bunch of stuff. So it's been a good experience, actually, and to be with such a diversified board and for such a good many years, and we've been together now. So we're strong. We have the skills, really diversified skills, everything from architecture to communications to ecoforestry and logging. So, we have what it takes. One of the issues though becomes, succession planning. We want to make sure that we have invited enough people of various expertise and ages and backgrounds, and to come in with the eventual thought of them taking over at some point in time, because some of us are getting a little long in the tooth. So
Not me.
not you, not Eric. Yeah, except for
I'm the youngest one.
Yeah. So yeah, with the exception of Eric. Yeah. So the thing is, to ensure that there is a continuity of people then who understand the concept, the origins, and understand the future.
Right. And there's some neat ties too. Like a lot of us, or many of us, or almost all of us, have ties back to Merv as well. And Nancy definitely does, and Barry, and I met Merv in the 1990s, early 2000s, and toured around with him a few times. And then people like Nancy Turner and I and Barry too, then we have connections to the wider forestry in BC, Barry up on Cortez Island, and then Nancy with her ethnobotany, and then Nancy and I both connect with people like Jerry Franklin down in Washington State. So then we get the Pacific Northwest aspect too. And then Nancy has ties to the Clackawatt Sound process, which Jerry Franklin was involved in. I mean, there's just so many synergies and connections with all of this, and all this sort of massive knowledge that then we're helping funnel through Wildwood and then out of Wildwood back out into BC and back into the world. So there's some neat possibilities and knowledge that we have and how to do this, and going from MERV into the present, that then I think that if people are interested should definitely, you know, reach out and contact us at Wildwood and see what is it that can be, what solutions can we put together for climate change and forestry in BC, and driving local economies, and doing more with the wood, and looking after these ecosystems to let them look after us. So yeah, there's just so much neat stuff.
Excellent. Any closing thoughts, Kathy?
Just that, you know, we would like people then to come and experience Wildwood on a personal level. I think that's really important. And we really want our young people, you know, we have programs now K to 12 that are encouraging young people to come onto the property and to learn firsthand about the forest. And I think that's really key, that people experience this firsthand. We're always there to answer questions, comments, and to make friendships. You know, this is about community. This is about all of us being together and to, you know, support the forest and the services that it provides, and to be there as a community to continue to build Wildwood.
Excellent. And you mentioned youth, and you talked about the Earth Guardians doing some work out there, and they're some of the Earth Guardians are guests in our summit. And yeah, I don't think people have to wait, or youths have to wait until they have a formal day at school to come out to Wildwood. You know, it's something that they could do on their own, get a group of friends together, or join Earth Guardians, or ask their parents, and go out there and learn and enjoy. Well, thank you guys very much. This has been a really thoroughly, you know, you guys covered all the bases in regards to how Wildwood works, the benefits, and how it can be a solution on a larger scale. So thank you guys so much. And I look forward to more in the future. Take care.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.